Welcome to my YouTube channel. On this channel, we find facts and fine-tune figures. Welcome back, guys. I hope you are enjoying our series. Now, the next module is data warehouse. Now, one will wonder that since we already have a data lakehouse, why do we need a data warehouse? It's a traditional data warehouse with full transactional T-SQL capabilities where you are fully in control of creating tables, loading and transforming and querying your data in data warehouse using either Microsoft Fabric or T-SQL commands. You can create one or several warehouses within a Fabric workspace. A standard data warehouse is populated by any of these. We are already familiar with pipelines and data flow, but I'm going to walk us through the other ones. Just like your lakehouse, once you provision a data warehouse, automatically an SQL endpoint is also created for you, which you can connect to using your SQL connection string, either using your SSMS or your Azure Data Studio. However, we need to do a comprehensive comparison between a data lakehouse and a data warehouse so that we can appreciate where they are different and how we can bring the combined powers of a data warehouse and a data lakehouse. Come with me. So this documentation has been provided by Microsoft for comparison and choosing between a data warehouse and a lakehouse. This is a decision guide documentation that is available on Microsoft Learn website. So data volume, both a warehouse and a lakehouse can take unlimited volume of data. A data warehouse can only take a structured data, and that is obvious because you can only use T-SQL, whereas a lakehouse can take structured, semi-structured and unstructured data. And the developer that can use your warehouse, your data warehouse developer, your SQL engineer, then the same for lakehouse, your data engineer and your data scientist can work in a lakehouse. Now, where this gets interesting is because there is a notebook that is available for you to use in your lakehouse, but you don't have a notebook available in your data warehouse. And that is where you can now unite the power of a lakehouse and a warehouse. Say, for example, you have a data warehouse that you want to do an analytical engine, you want to do a machine learning model on. So you can use the combined power of a lakehouse and a warehouse as I'm going to show us in the course of this module. Then primary developer skill set for a data warehouse. With just your SQL, you are good to work on a data warehouse. Whereas on your lakehouse, you need your Spark SQL, your PySpark, and even your R or even Scala, depending on what you are provisioning. In your data warehouse, data are only organized in databases, schemas, and tables. Whereas in lakehouse, you can have folder, files, databases, and tables. This is very obvious because you can take even unstructured data. Then on your warehouse, you can only do your read operations with Spark and TSQL. The same thing for your lakehouse. However, with your write operation, you cannot do write operation for a lakehouse, but you can do write operation with your T-SQL in your warehouse, but you are doing that write operation with your lakehouse with Spark and R. Then multi-table transaction. There is no multi-table transaction in your lakehouse, but there is multi-table transaction. And primary scripts or language or interface is just your SQL for your data warehouse, whereas for your lakehouse is just your Spark notebook and Spark job definition that you can do. Then on the security side of things, you can take your security to object level from your table to your view to your store procedure and all of that. Whereas you cannot do all of those in your lakehouse, just your row level security and your table level security. Then it can be accessed from a shortcut. Then the shortcut too is available for both lakehouse and your warehouse. And then query across items, you can do that in both lakehouse and the warehouse. So we are going to delve into the practical section now and show us how we can actually ingest data into our data warehouse and how we can actually unite the power of both a warehouse and a lakehouse. Come with me. So we are going to go back to our Fabric environment, then we'll go back to our workspace, which is Fabric course, and then we'll just clear out this filter now so that we can see everything that we have created and see the reward for our hard work so far. So now we are going to be creating a data warehouse. To create a data warehouse, you have to switch your experience to data warehouse experience. So once you switch your data warehouse experience, you can either create a warehouse or a sample warehouse, or you want to do data ingestion into your warehouse using your data pipeline or your data flow gen 2. But what we want to do now is to create a warehouse. So we are going to click warehouse and then we are going to give our warehouse a name. So let's call it first first warehouse, then you click on create. So once you click on create, your warehouse will be created for you. Unlike your lakehouse that you can ingest with so many things like your data flow and your um data pipeline, you can also use your T-SQL to ingest into your data warehouse. So this is the interface for your data warehouse. So automatically you already see you have your SQL endpoint, which is familiar. You have your refresh button, you have your settings icon where you can actually rename your warehouse or where you can get your SQL connection string. So I'll close this interface. Then you can have your new SQL query, your new visual query. So I had mentioned previously that we are going to be delving deeper into visual query. So this is the part where we are going to explore these new visual queries, one of the new features that come with Microsoft Fabric. So unlike your lakehouse, you can also ingest with T-SQL and data flow and also data pipeline. So we are already familiar ingesting data with data flow gen 2 and your data pipeline. So the one we want to explore now is your T-SQL. So I will click on T-SQL command. However, I have provided the the script to create your to ingest data into your warehouse. So now we have this interface to write our SQL query. So you can go back to your GitHub repository and then you navigate to data warehousing experience. So there are two scripts that I have provided. The first one is that you are using your copy into to actually ingest data into your warehouse. And then the second one is your CTAS statement SQL. So your CTAS is create as. So but let's focus on copy into now for now. So let's click on this. So if you click on this, that will give you the script. So you can copy this SQL script and take it back into your Fabric environment. So now in your Fabric environment, you can replace this script with what you copied. Control A, then you do Control V. So now what is going on here is just a simple SQL syntax to create this table for us. Now this syntax, when I run this table now, I will run this table. I'll run this table. So once I run it, it's going to create a table for us. And once the table is created, we'll first check if that table has any data. So that is what this part of the script is doing. So you can see that the query has run successfully. Query has run successfully. So I can now come back to this my schema side and see if the table that I actually created with this script is available on my schema. So I'll expand on my schema, then I'll come to DBO here, then I'll come to tables. So I expect that I have a table. Now the name of the table I created is Bing COVID-19 data. So this is the table. So I can script this table now and right click here and click on top 100 and see if my table contain any data. So this is going to run, and then once it's run, I don't expect to have any table, just the column header that I'm expecting to see on this query. So we have the column header without any data in it. So I'll come back to SQL query 1. So on this SQL query 1 now, we had created the table using this script. Now we now want to ingest data. Now this is the copy into syntax to actually ingest from blob storage. Ingesting from blob storage is not new. We did that with Lakehouse, but you can also ingest from blob storage using this copy into SQL query, where you can now use your copy into from. You define the link to your blob storage, which is this, and then you with this your with clause, you define the file type, because the type of the file that you have in your blob is a package file. So it could be a data file or it could be a CSV file. So if you have your data in any blob storage, you can actually use your copy into script statement to ingest data into. So we are going to just select this part of the code now, and then we are going to run it. So once we run this, it's going to ingest data from this public blob storage, which is COVID-19 blob storage, and put data into our table. So once this is run, then we can go back and check our table to make sure that we now have data in our table. So now that this query is done running, so I will just run this part of the query and see if data have actually been ingested into my table. So I will run this now, and I expect to have data in my table. So we can see now that data has been ingested into this table using the copy into statement. But however, before we proceed, I want to know the number of rows of data that was ingested. So I will run this part of the SQL script and click on run. So I have almost 5 million rows of data being ingested using the copy into statement. So now we can proceed and check the other ingestion method using your T-SQL method. So I'm going to click on new SQL query. So on this new SQL query now, I'll click new SQL query. However, there are templates that you can use to create your store procedure, view, table, or a schema. So if you click on any of these now, it's going to give you the template that you can edit. Say for example, now you want to create a view, you just edit this query for yourself to create a view. But that's not what you want to do now. What we want to do now, our focus is on creating uh, uh, table using the SITA statement. So we are going to be ingesting data using the SITA statement. So you go back uh, to your GitHub repository where I have provided a code. So this is the code here in your GitHub repository. So if you come to your data warehouse info that you have two SQL scripts there. We have used the one for copy into and we're using the one for SITA. So I'll just copy this now and go back into my Fabric environment. So within my Fabric environment, I will paste the SQL script that I have copied. So now sitters means you are creating table as a select statement. So if you look at this script very well, you realize that we have create table. Then we are defining the name of the table we want to create to be COVID data in this DBO schema and of course in our data warehouse that we have created. Now, if you look closely at the select statement that we are using, you realize that it's just um, select statement that removes some columns from the table that we created earlier. So instead of creating all the columns here, I'm using a select statement to create a new table. I'm creating a new table and that select statement is querying from this table that we had created earlier. So if we have multiple tables within our warehouse, we can use any select statement. Our select statement could include a where clause, can be a join query, sub query, could be a CTE or whatever kind of query it is. Any select statement can be used to create a new table. So this is the syntax that you can use to create and ingest data into table using the SITA statement. So create table, the warehouse name, the schema, and the name of the table that you are creating. So I'm going to run this query now, and then it's going to ingest table into my data warehouse. It's going to ingest table into my data warehouse. So once the script is done running, then I can go into my warehouse and check for this table called COVID data. So this script has run successfully. So I can come to my table right here, then I click on refresh. So once I click on refresh, then I expect to see this COVID data in here. So here it is. So we have been able to use our SITA statement to create table, to ingest table into our data warehouse. So I'm going to rename this script now. I'm going to rename it to the appropriate name. So I'll rename and I will call it ingesting data using SITAs. Control A, ingest data, using SITAs. SITAs is create table as select. So I can rename that. So in our data warehouse now, we have been able to ingest data using the copy into, and we have also ingest data using the SITA statement. However, I want to take this a step further. Now, assuming that this is a production environment and then we want to keep our data up to date, what we can do is that we can actually add a drop table statement to our SQL script. So if we add a drop table statement to our SQL script, then after that is done, we now run this SITA statement. Then that will keep our table updated within this warehouse. So how do we do that? What we can do is that we are going to be dropping this table. Now this table now is in this warehouse and this is the table. So we copy this part of the script, then we replace it here. So once we replace it here and then I can do control V. So if I run this script now, it's going to drop this COVID data for me. So I will run this script. So every time this part of the script is run, then it will drop this COVID statement. Then you can see that this table has run successfully. Then I can come back, you can see that we no longer have COVID data here. So I'm going to run this query all together now. So every time I run this query now, it's going to first drop it and then recreate this table so that our table in this uh, data warehouse is up to date. So I will run it all together now. So to drop it first and then recreate it again. Now to automate this process, what I can do is to create a pipeline that will be running this query concurrently at a regular interval that I specify. So what I will do is I will come back to my data warehouse experience, then I will come to get data again. So I will create a new data pipeline. So once I create a data pipeline, then a data pipeline will be created for me. So in that data pipeline, what we are going to be doing is to recreate a a script activity. So I will call this one CTAS pipeline. CTAS pipeline, then I will click on create. So once I click on create, the pipeline will be created, and immediately that pipeline is created, which we are already familiar with, we are going to be adding a script activity into our pipeline. Then we are now going to use that SQL script. So now we have our data pipeline, and of course we are not doing any copy activity, so you can cancel this. Yes, I'm canceling it. So what I want to do now is come to activity tab. So in my activity tab now, I can now look for all these activity that we have here. So the activity that I want is actually a script activity. A script activity allows us to run SQL script. So I'll come to my setting tab. So right under my setting tab, my data is stored in a workspace, so I leave it on a workspace. Then I will select the warehouse where I want this script activity to be running, which is my first warehouse. So once I have that selected, then I have this place where I select if it is a query or no query. So within my first warehouse, I will go back there. Then I can now copy this SQL scripts. I will do Control A, Control C. Then I go back into my pipeline. So in my pipeline, I now paste this script here. So what this script does is that it's going to drop that COVID data and recreate it. So this way, our data is up to date for our CTA statement. So what I will then do is that I will come to schedule pipeline here. Then I will turn this on. Then I will select the frequency, maybe it's weekly. I want it to be happening every week, and then I want it to be happening on Mondays. Then the time I want it to be happening on Mondays, I want it to be uh, by 8 a.m. on Monday. 8 a.m. on Monday. So I'll pick 8 a.m. on Monday. So every 8 a.m. on Mondays, this script will be running, and 8 a.m. on Mondays. Then I can now pick the start date. Let's say I'm starting from tomorrow, which is Monday. Then end date. I don't want this thing to end anytime soon, so I can pick as far as 2028, 2032, then December 31st. So then I can pick my time zone right here, which is UTC +1, and I click on apply. So this way I can be sure that the table that is being created and being ingested by my sister statement is actually up to date, because I've been able to automate that process. So now that it has been applied, then I can click on close. Then I can go back to my warehouse. So in my warehouse now, we have been able to ingest data using CTAS and using copy into activity. So the last thing I want to take us through in data warehousing is cross database query. Cross database query means that I have one warehouse here, assuming that I have a second warehouse, but then I want to be able to query data in my first warehouse and the second warehouse without necessarily having to do any data movement. So these are one of the things that comes with Fabric Data Warehouse. So I can query database from the two warehouses without necessarily having to copy or move that data into the one of the warehouses. So how do I do that? One, I can also do that if in case where I have a data that is already in a useful form, let's say in our lakehouse, just like the Medallion lakehouse that we created. But I want to be able to use the full T-SQL ability on that Medallion lakehouse data. However, T-SQL full ability is not available in a lakehouse. So the only way I can unleash the power of full T-SQL capability on the data on the lakehouse is to bring that lakehouse into our warehouse. So what I can do now is that I can click on Explorer here and click on Add Warehouses. Now the exception and the condition for this to work is that the lakehouse or the warehouse that you want to do cross database for, they must be within the same workspace. So I'm going to pick this Medallion Lakehouse. So we want to be able to use the full capability of T-SQL that is available in our warehouse for the data in our lakehouse. So this way now we are going to be able to cross database query of our lakehouse and our warehouse. And then on the other side, on the opposite direction, just like we are bringing data from Medallion architecture, which is a lakehouse, into our warehouse for the full capability of T-SQL that is available in warehouse, we can also bring data from our warehouse into our lakehouse using the same approach of going to the add extra warehouse to it. So why you want to do that in the case of moving data from your warehouse into your lakehouse is that your lakehouse does not have access to a notebook, and notebook is what will allow you to be able to do some data science workload on your data. So in an event where you have data in your warehouse and you want to subject that data in the warehouse to some data science workload, then you can do a cross database query so that you can now have access to your data in your lakehouse for your machine learning workload. So in this case now we are bringing data from our Medallion lakehouse into our warehouse so that we can now use full SQL capability on our Medallion data. Again, the condition is that they must be in the same workspace. So I will click on this and then I will click on confirm. So once I do that, you can now see that in our Explorer now we have both our warehouse and our Medallion lakehouse. So what we can do quickly now is that we can actually ingest data from our lakehouse into our warehouse. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to come to create table as select statement now. So this table I want to create now, I'm going to just copy this code and copy this code. I'll do Control C, then I'll click on new query. So then I'll click on new SQL query and I'll paste this code. So what I want to do now is that I want to create a table from my Medallion lakehouse into my warehouse for the purpose of cross database querying. So to do that now, I already know the table I want to create. I want to create table into my first warehouse, and then I want to call that table. Maybe I want to create my customer table. So let me just call it customer. So I'll call it cost customer. So as and this as now is a like I said, a SQL statement now. I want to create a table from this my Medallion lakehouse schema. So I'll come to this DBU, then I will just remove this guy. I will remove this part of the script. I will remove this part also. I will remove this. So now I can now drag and drop one of this customer table here. So I will drop this customer table here. Then I will do select all from. So if I run this script now, it's going to create a copy of this customer table in my warehouse. It's going to create a copy of this customer table in my warehouse. So I will click on run. So if I go back to my warehouse now, after this script is done running, I'm expecting to find a table called costs in my warehouse. So I will collapse the lake house and then come to my warehouse, expand the schema, expand the DBU, then tables. Then I'm supposed to have cost table. So I will just click on refresh and I'll just refresh this table. So once I click on refresh, I'm supposed to have the table called CUST. Yeah, so here is this table. So now to do a cross database query, this is where we are now going to be exploring the feature of new visual query. New visual query is a UI tool that we can use to do our merge. So what I will do is that I will collapse this schema, I will collapse this warehouse. So I will come to new visual query. So on this new visual query now, I can also rename it. I will rename it to cross database querying. So I will rename, then I will do cross database querying and I will rename it. So now that I've done the renaming, what I have to do with the new visual query is this. Now I will come to my Medallion lakehouse, then I will drag my customer table here. So this cross database query is a sort of a join operation. So we now have it here, just like your Power Query. That's the interface that new visual query gives you. Then I'll come to customer table within my warehouse. So then I'll expand on schema, I'll expand on tables, then I'll pick this CUST table also. I will drop it here. So once I drop it here, then I have two tables from two separate warehouses. One from first warehouse, then the other one from Medallion Lakehouse. So what I can do is that I can do any of these operations. So I can click on this here, then you can see all the operations that you can do for the visual query, or you can click on this. So what I want to do now is that I want to merge these two tables together. So it's a sort of join operation, but you will find that as we proceed. So if I click on plus sign, so I will just do merge query, and then the query I want to merge is this customer table using the customer key. Then I will come to this cost table that I created with CTAS also. Then I will use customer ID. So it's going to estimate the match. So we can see that the match is 100%. I can click on OK. So once I click on OK now, then I can see my merge. So what I can do is I can click on view SQL. So if I click on view SQL, I'm going to see the underlying SQL that is joining the two tables for me. So this is the underlying SQL. So let me just close this now. I can expand. Now I have my table here. I can expand and click on this two directional arrow. So then I can now pick the column I want. Let's say I want just first first name. So I can click on OK. So once this is done, I can now come here and click on view SQL. So if I click on view SQL, then I can see the underlying SQL that powers this operation. So I can edit SQL script so that we can now look at this script critically. So if you look at this script very well, you realize that it's a sort of join operation which you can edit accordingly. So this way we have been able to query customer table from Medallion lake warehouse, and then we are able to cross query it with this CUST table from first warehouse. So this is how cross database is done. You can now edit it accordingly to suit your use case.